The Russian Federation has broken through the Ukrainian armed forces' defensive line. Donbas is hanging by a thread. Fierce battles have erupted right at this very moment. Ukrainian defenders say that hell really does exist, and right now it's there in the Sumy region like a meat grinder. The enemy is fleeing with all their might. Our forces have launched a counterattack. Why are the Russians gritting their teeth but not retreating, even on the hottest sections of the front? Details in the following report.
The Russians made a sudden breakthrough on the front before the meeting between Putin and Trump. This was reported by the Wall Street Journal. The occupiers found a gap in the Ukrainian defenses and then used their massive reserves of manpower to break through. This refers to the advance in the direction of Dobropilya in the Donetsk region.
Now, of course, Russian troops will try to capitalize on this moment. They will try to consolidate, send additional reinforcements there, more forces, and possibly even equipment. And now, even in the next few days, the armed forces of Ukraine have a chance to somehow contain this breakthrough, to cut off, for example, these breakthrough units, to liberate territory at the very base of this breakthrough, or to start attacking from different directions and take, let's say, all the villages and settlements along the way so that there is nowhere for them to hide and so on.
At the same time, military analysts report that the Russian Federation does not control all the territory that the assault troops managed to pass through. Most likely during the breakthrough they were moving in light vehicles, and at the moment it cannot be said that the enemy has managed to consolidate and take control of the entire salient.
For now, there are only sabotage and reconnaissance groups there. These are irregular troops.
The Ukrainian command has already responded to the Russian breakthrough. It is reported that the most combat-ready National Guard units from the OZU battalion, who have already more than once experienced those same small assault groups, have been redeployed to this direction as reinforcements.
Also, it is important to note that this is a significant point.
Commenting on the situation, the spokesperson for the Dnipro military group confirmed the Russians' local success, but noted that it involved about a dozen soldiers who managed to slip through the line of contact and are now hiding in the trenches wherever they managed to get.
At the same time, it is crucial to acknowledge that multiple events or circumstances are unfolding concurrently, creating a complex interplay of factors that demand our attention and consideration. This simultaneity means that various aspects are happening in parallel, requiring a comprehensive understanding of their interconnectedness and immediate impact on the situation at hand.
Experts note that Pokrovsk itself, the city that all these efforts were aimed at encircling and which is located slightly south of the breakthrough site, continues to hold quite confidently despite constant heavy assaults.
In other words, the Russian troops had been advancing actively up to this point, but in Rodinsky they've really hit a serious obstacle, and for a couple of weeks now there have been heavy battles there. They can't make any progress. So, basically, the defense of this sort of semicircular salient is holding quite confidently, I'll put it cautiously. As I've already mentioned, there are a lot of Russian forces there, they're constantly attacking, but even so, we're not seeing any kind of collapse there.
The situation is also tense to the north of Pokrovsk. There, the Russians have once again become more active in the Lyman direction. However, after several days of intensified attacks, apart from dozens of dead assault troops, Russia has gained nothing here.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
Will our forces have the necessary reserves? I don't really know. Basically, we do indeed have powerful forces that can effectively hold back the enemy's advance and prevent them from moving forward.
Monitoring channels are also reporting Russian activity in Crimea. Equipment is currently being transferred there from the Moscow and Leningrad military districts, with the possibility of it being further sent to the Zaporizhia direction or towards Pokrovsk. However, in recent months for Russia, using armored vehicles in assaults has become a luxury, so the entire operation could simply be a deception.
At the moment, yes, the Russian forces have not set any particularly difficult tasks for the Ukrainian armed forces, specifically on the Zaporizhia front, in the Zaporizhia region. That is, yes, there have been local attacks there, and maybe they will try to create some more serious tension, including to force reserves to be redeployed from the Pokrovsk direction, simply so there aren't enough forces everywhere.
Announcer, but on the Sumy direction, it is the Russians who are lacking forces. Yes, according to President Volodymyr Zelensky, in the Sumy region, the armed forces of Ukraine managed to retake a third of all the captured settlements, which is 6 out of 18. In 2 locations, according to Zelensky, the defense forces even reached the border with Russia.
Roman Busk. They can't even properly hold on to these territories. It's not the first village. Some have been cleared, some have been liberated, 2 settlements have been freed, and now fighting is still ongoing for Alexeyevka. So, Ukrainian forces are gradually, of course within their means. It's clear they don't have a large number of reserves, but nevertheless they are reducing this bridgehead. It's not expanding, on the contrary, it's gradually shrinking. All of this is because, for example, during the invasion of the Sumy region, Russian troops are not using heavy equipment, making it much harder for them to defend.
Announcer, the defense forces are also holding their positions in the Zaporizhia region and have advanced 1 kilometer deep into enemy positions in Luhansk region. Anna Timofeeva.
Chasiv Yar is being choked by strikes from FPV drones. The occupiers seem to go berserk, launching assaults, but didn't even make it halfway. Our artillery struck and wiped out the Russian horde. They scattered into tiny pieces and in panic tried to save those whom our shells had missed. The enemy clung to Kostyantynivka, however, and received a powerful beating there. Cannonade of misfortunes of the Russian army. Which of our defenders is behind this? Don't miss out.
Correspondent. It was probably a living force, yes it was. Military? Yeah. Correspondent. The smoke barely has time to clear before another FPV flies in. Since morning, in the area of Chasiv Yar, our defenders have been eliminating occupiers who tried to hide in the thickets.
Military. 2 men at a time are moving in our direction. Well, now an FPV has just hit them. Correspondent.
And as for the apartment buildings, the artillerymen have already worked them over. Since morning, increased enemy activity was also noticed there.
Military. Yeah, something was running around there. 3 or 4 men. They've been there for 2 days already, hanging around. We hit them a bit.
Correspondent. The front has been rumbling since early morning. With the first rays of sunlight, the Russians strike with glide bombs and artillery. But our gunners from the 24th King Danilo Brigade are not staying silent either.
Correspondent.
For a while, the front falls silent, but this quiet is deceptive, because instead of artillery shells or rockets, drones are flying in the sky. Artilleryman.
Here, the panoramic site was completely destroyed. Right here, you can see the drone-dropped munitions welded on. There, a shaped charge jet pierced straight into the ammo compartment. Artilleryman, right into the ammo compartment. Correspondent, right here, yes? Artilleryman, yes.
Correspondent. Artillerymen have always been a prime target for the enemy, and with the advent of drones, they're hunted almost around the clock. Artilleryman.
There's fear, but we're kind of getting used to it, and a lot helps. Guys go ahead, guide us. Electronic warfare units, of course, get involved. That's it. Well, basically, I guess I've gotten used to it by now. Adrenaline.
Correspondent. And here, in fact, are the footage of the work of the artillerymen of the 24th Brigade. Together with drone pilots, they recently stopped another Russian assault on Chasiv Yar. Pilot.
This team won the battle and everything. 8 shells were fired. I set the cover and that's it. Without a spotter, 8 shells landed in 1 spot.
Correspondent. At that time, the occupiers in armored vehicles tried to bring in manpower. Among the soldiers were women, but not all of them made it to the assault. 2 occupiers were killed, 11 more were wounded, and the equipment burned. Artilleryman.
Well, now they've started storming a bit more than, say, a couple of months ago. Now, more massive and sustained assaults have truly begun, and already with the significant involvement of some of their armored vehicles and heavy equipment. They probably want to capture the entirety of Chasiv Yar completely and as swiftly as possible, aiming to secure this strategic location. Although they claim they've already captured it, well, that's not true.
Correspondent. Chasiv Yar is in complete ruins, but for the Russians it is extremely important. Nearby is the long-suffering Kostyantynivka, which the enemy is also tearing down brick by brick. Over a year of fighting for the city, the defenders here have taken out more than 1,000 occupiers and destroyed their equipment. Although the artillerymen themselves speak rather modestly about their contribution to the defense. Artilleryman.
Well, our primary job is mostly to effectively stop stationary enemy equipment and significant concentrations of enemy personnel, and our FPV drones truly help us immensely with this crucial task, as they are the ones precisely stopping all these aggressive assaults, the formidable enemy vehicles, and the relentless advance of enemy forces.
Correspondent. While we are filming, the artillerymen are checking their equipment. The order to fire can come at any moment, so everything must be ready. Artilleryman.
The sun rises from over there and it shines very brightly. It can burn. Artilleryman, so the number of shots is about...
Correspondent. Successfully camouflaging and digging in deeper. These are the realities even for artillerymen. And for deep trenches, you need equipment. So, using the details on the screen, you can join the fundraiser and donate for special equipment for the soldiers of the 24th Brigade. It will save more than one life. Ole Kornienko, Fakti ICTV, United News, Anna Timofeyeva.
We took apart Russian Shaheds for parts. The components that make up these deadly drones are astonishing, shocking even. America and Switzerland have played a dirty trick. Parts from these countries are increasingly being found in Russian drones. A real betrayal. China is not the biggest evil. Don't miss what's next.
These are exclusive shots of the wreckage of enemy drones. We are with you in one of the facilities where examinations of downed missiles and drones are conducted. Not every film crew can get in here. We're surrounded by a whole warehouse of drones. A specialist is showing us the trophies they're working with. For safety reasons, we are not showing the expert's face.
Here we have two primary and distinct types of Shaheds, specifically the Geran 2 models, which are currently and extensively being utilized in ongoing operations.
These are them, right?
Yes, there are several here. The KC series and the I series.
Here are the Iranian kamikaze drones that Tehran supplied to the enemy at the start of the full-scale invasion. And this interesting exhibit is the Herbera drone. It doesn't have any combat payload, and essentially it imitates a real drone as a decoy maneuver.
They're very cheap. The construction is simple, no fiberglass or composite materials, just ordinary foam. It's very light, and its task is simply to fly nearby alongside when a swarm of Shaheds is coming to be close and create the impression of a mass attack.
And this is the Geran 2. It's quite large, 3 by 3 meters. The expert shows which parts it consists of.
This body is made of lightweight composite materials. It's quite light. In any aircraft, it's very important how much fuel you can load, how big of a warhead you can install. The heavier, the better. Here we can see the fuel tanks. The fuel system usually has 2 electric pumps with filters. This is the engine, and
this engine, it
is one of which, in particular, the following
manufacturer from which
country? Well, as I said on the website, the Made in China platform, these companies, Chinese, yes, the engines. This here is the onboard computer, a very important system, the onboard computer. This unit is actually called B101. It comes already assembled. Avionics panel, this is simply, the launch, the start in such a...
And that's not all. We are taken to a laboratory where specialists have recreated the internal components of the Russian Geran 2 on a test stand.
Here it starts with the generator part. Servo motors, servo drives, the Comet system, battery pack, GNSS system, and there's even some kind of alarm that was installed on the Shahed. It's very rare to come across. But we managed to get such an avionics panel. The most important, the key element is the onboard computer. There's even a starter, see? And it's all connected and everything works. Now our specialists will show how it works.
Of all the parts from Russian Shaheds that we've seen, most of the components are of foreign manufacture, the expert says. But recently, the share of components from China has increased significantly.
A very large portion comes from the United States, well, because they're basically leading in microchip manufacturing. There are also well-known ones like the Netherlands, Switzerland, Taiwan, South Korea. And there is such a trend, for example, at the beginning. At first there were very few purely Chinese components, but now, already at this point, we can see that the number is increasing and the replacement with components from the People's Republic of China is in full swing.
It is precisely the Celestial Empire that is the #1 country for supplying components for Russian UAVs, experts say.
90% of the components we see in Russian weapons enter Russia through China. That is, China acts as a transit hub. And there are different models here. Sometimes they are manufactured in the United States, purchased in the US by a Chinese company, and then the Chinese company resells them to Russian entities. And sometimes, for example, an American factory is located in the People's Republic of China. So from this factory, from this subsidiary company in China, this component goes to some Chinese intermediary, and then from the Chinese intermediary it ends up in Russia. And this is the most complex challenge.
Not just Chinese ones. Recently, Indian components were also found in Russian drones. This was reported by the president's office. Experts are showing what they are.
We came across some very interesting labeling. Here it says, look, India is written. So this is just a regular voltage rectifier from the generator to the systems.
Both companies, upon learning that such sensitive and critical information had originated from Ukraine, issued statements asserting that it is not always feasible or even possible for companies to meticulously track the ultimate end user of their products. This assertion was made despite the fact that some of the technologies they produce are inherently dual use, meaning they have both civilian and military applications. Consequently, given the nature of these technologies, these companies are generally expected to possess a comprehensive understanding of where their products ultimately end up and are obligated to implement and enforce appropriate and stringent bans on the re-export of these specific products to unauthorized entities or regions, thereby preventing their misuse or diversion.
How does Russia manage to circumvent sanctions and obtain foreign components for weapons production? After all, any supplies to the aggressor country from American and European manufacturers are prohibited. Experts explain the problem lies in shadow schemes involving intermediary companies. And here, once again, China comes into play.
I'll be honest, in over a year, we haven't seen a single instance where these components were delivered directly to Russia. And for the most part, 90% of these components, which are produced by countries in the sanctions coalition, end up in Russia from the People's Republic of China. In other words, China is essentially acting as a transit hub for supplying components to the military-industrial complex of the Russian Federation.
Countries like Kazakhstan have become more active, as well as, to some extent, Azerbaijan. Until recently, Uzbekistan, Armenia, and the United Arab Emirates, which have been and continue to be a significant hub for gray schemes of supplying electronic components to the aggressor's arms industry. So these countries act as intermediaries using bypass routes to supply goods to Russia.
Experts emphasize that intermediary firms supplying components are constantly being sanctioned. But this is not enough. It is necessary for the restrictions to target the manufacturers themselves. But this is much more difficult to do. Olena Lohinova, Serhiy Kilimnik. Details from the Intermarathon TV channel, United News.
That's all from me for now. I was with you, Darina Hutsakalo. Even more intense news from the front in our next broadcast. And in the meantime, don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. See you soon.